Okay. So we want to start mapping the UI experience of CD component and to see how it fits into the wider product while the engineers are creating the specs for the API and all the other implementation technical details for more of, let's call it, the backend part and the engine. Just very briefly on my side, there is a possibility of speaking about current customers, onboarding of current customers to that new part of the product. There is that what we spoke about. Someone is entering the product today. They need to decide where they want to go, left or right. And there is that we call it naming and synergy of what exists in Semaphore today and how it will be in the future. I mean, potentially we can start with that and dump that on a paper or in Whimsical, just to have that mapping, because it exists. It will exist regardless of, if you want to deal with that or not, and in what way.
I think that's good. Yeah, on all the sessions that we had, we were focused on details and the functionality definition, and but it might be a good idea to start with basics, as in problem statement, and define what we are trying to solve and what are the user needs, because we have those, right? But
Yeah.
And we have that context internally, but would be good to just write it down.
Yeah.
If we're starting to format this and shape it properly. And from there, we can then move on to what you're suggesting and seeing, okay, so our existing users and potentially new users that would be interested only in this part would come to this solution in order to solve those problems. So maybe I can, do you want me to, yeah,
maybe you can create a, yeah.
I'll just move this. Let's say start with problem statements. So what do you say is the problem or the opportunity here?
I mean, based also on the recent conversations, I think that what is easiest to communicate to people is that single pane of glass dashboard for your whole team organization project. You can see everything there, even if it's like in different repositories, different components of the system deployed to different, environments wherever. Right now in Semaphore, but also in other tools, it is pretty challenging to have that kind of overview. I open one page, and there I have components that represent my whole system. Source of truth for everything. I want to know which version is deployed to particular cluster in Sao Paulo. This is not the problem about your
yeah, just establishing.
These are technical details that are hard to grasp for.
I'm just establishing context, maybe problem. Because of this, it is hard to have a clear overview. How would you define this? a single.
It is impossible. It is impossible to go to a place and know what's deployed across multiple projects, repos, environments.
So current state of their deployments. Any other problems? I mean,
When that visibility is the main thing, is easiest to explain. But the other is obviously when you want to orchestrate those things.
yes, that's what I wanted to say. Orchestrating. Not just deployments, but workflows.
Triggers across projects as a first-class citizen don't exist in Semaphore today. So you have to use APIs as you go down.
Yeah. There is also, I mean, technically, I don't know if that's, we mentioned visibility. It's impossible to reach artifacts where across multiple projects or environments. No single place where I can see current state of deployments. What else?
I think it's enough. I mean, the shorter it is, the better. If it hits the point, and I think this one does. We don't have to solve more.
All right. So let's try and describe this in 1 or 2 paragraphs tops. Like a value proposition.
Canvas can have multiple, maybe Canvas is a place that visualizes all this. main components of a canvas are stages, and stages can be mapped to pipelines, projects, anything that can be executed in the future, which is not just a Semaphore pipeline.
So let's try to define it as maybe for new users, something that will be clear to new users too. I think it would give us clarity also. Also for existing ones. I mean, is this a...
I refuse to to play with words too much.
Okay.
No, not about that tool of a project, but I mean, we kind of don't know in certain ways. So
Gotcha. That's what I was hoping that we could resolve through this exercise, but
we
let's...
cannot. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. Maybe too ambitious. Users too.
I also don't know if it's a new type of project.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's a noble thing that you want to achieve, but there is no straight path, from A to B. I think
okay, let's write what we know.
It's a struggle to now figure out. I mean, we know that Canvas consists of stages, and that stages. If you are looking at it, based on our discussions so far, when you look at the stage, a stage should be able to represent an environment, such as production environment of a certain app. And by looking at it, you should be able to know which version is deployed and when.
Can I have a stage that's just a CI build?
I mean, you can, but I think then we get into that developer speak of like, what are all the edge cases. I would start with, what's the most important, most valuable thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Here we also focused mainly on the deployments.
I think it's easiest to explain, also to understand. And yes, it's possible for it to be used to represent also other things, but
okay, stage represents an environment. Deployment environment.
Whatever is fine. I think that the first thing that comes after that is that it communicates what's running there, what is the latest successful deployment that happened to that environment, and what is the version of whatever is running there. It can be also multiple versions. So let's say environment is a blog that has the app and has a background worker which is sending emails. If you're looking at an environment at a stage, which is obviously representing, let's say, a production environment, you should be able to see that which versions of both of those service A and service B are deployed there, and when. Let's put this as maybe third or whatever thing.
What was that? Was the...
I mean, I'm thinking in those like highest value things that you can do. I think that the third thing in my mind right now is if I have a stage which is representing the stage, let's say staging test environment, and once it's green there and tested, whatever, it can be promoted to this production environment, so that connecting piece. I mean, this hierarchy of of things that's maybe a third thing that comes to mind.
On Canvas, user can connect multiple stages to define their deployment strategy. Like this?
You can say it like that.
Is this an okay representation of what you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a sub item, it's like it's in test. Once it's in test, I can deploy to prod. It's just kind of easier to understand. It's almost an example.
Is a test stage once QA.
Proofs.
Wait. This is an example. On Canvas, user can open the table view, show each stage and resource
version.
What are the stages? I mean, we know that they communicate what the latest successful deployment to that environment is, and shows the versions of resources and artifacts, and there's the historical record of those resources and artifacts. But there's nothing that explains that, or maybe we don't need to do that, but what do these stages run? Do they run existing pipelines, or can you open them and see the jobs inside? Or
I mean, there are two ways to approach this. If you want to be more not abstract, but kind of more forward-looking in a way, we can say stage should be able to run anything. Should be able, and by anything, it can be a pipeline within Semaphore. It can be Jenkins job. It can be GitHub action. It can be whatever. And I think here and now it's fine to state that, but we know that in MVP first version, we want to focus on running Semaphore pipeline. I mean, to support running Semaphore pipeline only.
right. You can define Is there anything else for this canvas feature that you can see?
I mean, my hunch is that we should not add more.
Yeah. Okay, so the issue is it's impossible to easily understand which artifacts are deployed where across multiple projects or environments. There is no single place where a user can see the current state of their deployments, and orchestrating workflows across multiple projects is challenging and currently requires using API because we don't have triggers across projects as a first-class citizen. We plan to address this with Semaphore Canvas, which we didn't yet define what it is, but we know that it consists of stages. Each stage represents an environment. It communicates what the latest successful deployment on that environment is, shows you the versions of resources and artifacts deployed to that environment. You can see the historical record of those resource versions. It can run anything, Semaphore pipeline, GitHub action, Argo CD workflow, or whatever it's called. But initially we'll be running Semaphore pipelines only. And you can define various conditions and policies on the stage level. In addition to that, you can connect multiple stages in a single canvas to define your deployment strategy. For example, you could have one QA stage with version of a resource deployed on it, and once it's approved or once something happens, that will trigger a second stage in chain, which is a production stage in this example, and that version of that resource will be deployed to this other environment. So you can kind of build dependencies across different stages in a single canvas. But in addition to that, on Canvas, you can also open a table view that shows you each stage with each resource and which version it is. So sounds like an okay description of a feature. Does it do anything else?
I mean, just a note, we will see. I don't know if the table will be part of the canvas or not, but it is in the realm of UX and UI and what will provide a good experience. But it is part of the feature as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's a UI question, but I would leave it here because
yeah, fine.
it's the simplest view to illustrate on, there's a stage and there's a resource.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we could talk about that new user versus existing user. Okay, map it, frame it as user stories that you mentioned, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah.
So you want to assume that
I would maybe start with the harder. Because if we, I mean, we can start either way, but what are the dangers? I think the main danger with, it's not that danger is maybe too strong of a word, but if we start with existing users and people that have things already set up within Semaphore, I think that the natural way of thinking, you lock yourself in and you remove a certain part of creativity and freedom. to create something, new and non-incrementally better and different. And we could end up being, okay, I don't know what's the worst example that I could take, but there is a huge software, and then we are shoveling in, just another feature, another feature, another feature, and it lives next to all the previous ones, and you end up being Jenkins, or or whatever else.
I agree. If we start with the existing users, they already have a large part of this defined in a way.
Yeah.
And we won't be mapping out full functionality, right?
Yeah.
So let's, and this is a pretty big feature on its own. So we can treat it as
I mean,
mapping out
it
the
can be,
new products, pretty much.
there is option of it being a separate product.
Let's treat it that way, at least for functionality, scope, design. We should approach it that way. It doesn't really depend on any existing infrastructure, right?
I mean, based on the decisions that we may make, it might or might not be, but it is pretty free, I would say.
I'm basing that on this, since it's.
I mean, if we would take a completely fresh start, so let's say that we have this skeleton of like you can register and log in.
Yep.
And Semaphore has agents and
There are some agents, yes.
There are very useful things for this kind of job, for this domain, that are already built, so we don't have to build everything from scratch. But from that point on, if you come in as like a completely new user, and maybe that, let's say, initial canvas is either already created for you, or it's like a one-click. You give it a name, and it appears as a blank sheet of paper.
Mm-hmm.
Then the first next step is obviously is blank, and you want to add the first stage. And let's say you add that stage, you give stage a name. And
okay.
I mean, if you want to write that down, I don't know if it's useful to write it down. They don't need to necessarily, but however you want.
Well, okay, let's yeah. So I create account and I log in.
Yeah, I log in for the first time. I get my canvas. There is kind of.
I'm not connecting any external resource.
No, we want you want. I think we want to get people to get as far as they can without needing to do heavy lifting. And let's say you drop the first stage in, so you have the first box in there. It's almost it's very easy to simulate the UX, I think, with Whimsical, actually, because
let's
you have a big sheet of paper, and then you can create the first square, and you give that square a name.
What do I want to achieve, by the way? These are the actions that I'm taking, but what's my goal?
I mean, it is a good question. My hunch is that, first and foremost, you want to deal with your deployment process, meaning your CD process and not necessarily, CI process. That's how I would perceive it. But
yeah, that's our main use case. So I have
a project I want to deploy. You can put it that way.
multi-repo project that deploying to multiple environments.
We can start that way. There is option with starting with something stupid simple, which has its own set of why yes, why no. That would be maybe deploying a trivial application somewhere. The con of that approach is that, well, that's not really a target audience.
Yes. There's, I mean, maybe you would to test it out.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that if you are testing this, then you have the use case where you have multiple environments and probably multi-repo. Multi-repo is optional. This is useful for single repo with multiple environments too. But multiple environments.
There is also the other approach. I mean, our approach is monorepo with multiple applications.
Yes.
So maybe multi-service, multi-application. I mean, it's useful if you have. It's very useful where you have either many applications or services that you are deploying, or you have many environments, and then you need to keep track of all of them, or you have many people in the company and you want to get them on the same page. Because even if it's relatively simple, but you need, it's like 5 services deployed across 3 environments, which you could say is not, not a rocket science thing, but you have dozens of teams that need to be, in sync, then it's useful. So one of those 3 variables need to be, more than 3 or more than certain number for this to be
useful. Even if it's a single repo or a service, but I have multiple
useful for all of them.
environments.
It's just that not sure how much they will be attracted.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, is this I didn't understand this part where you have a lot of people and a lot of teams.
Well,
if I have single app that I'm deploying to a single environment, doesn't really matter how big is my team. It's a simple use case. So would this be helpful in that?
But if you have a big team, it's impossible to have like a single environment,
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So
either of those 3, when it gets elevated, the attractiveness of this just increases. I mean, with that, we primarily say that if someone has like a simple 3 guys working on a simple app that they are deploying to a single environment, kind of a thing, attractiveness of this solution would not maybe be that high.
Got it. Okay, so I am in some DevOps type role, and I have multi-service or multiple apps or single app, that's spread out across multiple repos, doesn't really matter. But I have a project like that I'm deploying to multiple environments, and I want to automate my deployment process. That's kind of number one, right? I want to improve observability.
I'm not sure that the term observability is used in this case.
Let's say
visibility is dashboard. Yeah. Maybe you can close the sidebar so we get more real estate for this main thing.
Right. Rollbacks.
I mean, I would think it would end up being too extensive list of,
Good.
all the things that.
Okay, so, and I'm testing this. So I create account login for the first time, create a new blank canvas, create a first stage, which would be what?
Oh, yeah, we will very quickly, it seems, run into some, very, very practical questions. How to, do things. But yeah, we started with that approach of fresh product. I mean, when you have a first stage, the question is, what do you want to deploy? So that's artifact. You need inputs. You need to be able to specify how you are going to deploy it. What will be the steps? And the third one, tightly connected to the previous one, is where. Where are you going to deploy that? And it seems that where is mainly connected with the credentials, because whichever system you want to access, you need credentials to get into that system. So it's if it's a Linux, just a trivial Linux server somewhere, or if it's like a Kubernetes cluster or whatever it is, you need credentials to get into that system.
I have my use case. I have as a testing environment VM, DigitalOcean VM, right? And there is this Semaphore CI, Semaphore IO repo that has these releases. And whenever there's a new release, I want it to be deployed to this environment. So how would I do? Name is Alex DO QA. What do I do?
I mean, you have to tell you need that version thing. You need to tell the system what is that you are deploying. And in terms of version, it is in the inputs. Without getting into the string manipulation details of how you would specify that, essentially you would want to say, I want to deploy version 103 or 105 or whatever is the next one.
Wait. When I'm defining stage?
I'm speaking more about when you are actually deploying, but
I am currently creating a stage, and I want to do what I described. So I gave it a name, Alex DigitalOcean QA. What do I do next?
it's possible that the first next thing is that you have to define what do you want to run. We'll have to figure out what's optional and what's required. But in terms of inputs, I mean, in all occasions that when we spoke about this, we said that version is a must, you know. And you probably need to define what is the name of that you are deploying and what will represent a version of that. So I think that when it comes to the name, it's relatively free what you can define. But I would say here, maybe in a simplistic possible way, it would be a version. And then you would need to say what...
when you say version, it's like a type of artifact or...
No, it's literally that which is a string, which can be a semantic version or it can be a SHA. But
Right.
we need a way to tell the system what it is, because that input version is that event which is driving the whole system. And in your case, I think that the input for you would be a chart, you know, or a release on or on GitHub, you know.
So I'm defining this, and in is there an input type that says version? Because I could have multiple inputs, right?
Yeah, and this one is maybe in that required stage that you must define what version is. And now I have I cannot, like, I don't see right now if there is more that needs to be defined here, because it's a string that you are feeding into the system.
Oh, it's a string that I'm somehow feeding into the system.
It is that's a type of data that will be flowing into the system. And maybe this in this trigger piece, so this what you defined an input, that is maybe all required and kind of it's already there and just sitting there and waiting. But that, yeah. Yeah, value is empty string. I mean, you cannot define the value. Value will be fed through the system, into the system somehow else.
Yeah, here I'm not...
In terms of what will be the most useful thing for you, if it would exist, my hunch is that for your specific use case, the best case scenario, if this can be listened on new GitHub releases. Because if you go to, you know, Semaphore, github.com/Semaphore/Semaphore, and you want, whenever there is a new release, you want that to be the input, the trigger for your deployment, but you might want to approve it, but it should be queued for you. You know, you go into Semaphore, Pedro says, okay, I released 105, RC1. You come in here, and it's already there for you, and you just click, you know, yes, go. I want it in DO, and it goes into the DO. I mean, I think that would make you happy.
Yes, That part is clear. But as a user, I'm going here. I say create new stage. I give it a name. Then it says, each stage has some inputs. There can be multiple types of inputs, but one that you need to have, at least one, is the version type, right?
Yeah.
So I need to define one input that is a version, at least one input that's of a version type. And I give it name, and maybe it has some other values, doesn't really matter. But my input of the type version is Semaphore Community Edition, right?
Yes.
So
And for the sake of, if you can you open just in a new tab, Semaphore IO repo?
yes. Uh,
I mean, if you go to releases and click on releases, yeah, that V101, V102,
mhm.
that will be that string. And now Pedro is probably going to start releasing 103, 11 RC1, 11 RC2, 11 RC3, right?
Yes. And I want.
Yeah, but point being that that string there is a very useful, piece of information that you will.
Right, but that is, so here I just define the name and the type, right?
Yeah, let's say, yeah.
At the stage level. And I also need to define when is what triggers and what starts this
Yes, yes.
stage.
And for this like nice narrative that we are building, we would need to have a first class, support that stage can be triggered by a new release on GitHub.
Yeah. So I'm defining stage. I give it name. I say, hey, you need to have at least one input. What define your inputs? I define this. And then it says when will this stage trigger based on
What
what?
will feed us? What will feed us? Yeah.
And in this case, it's being triggered. There are options of this being triggered but by another stage, but since there is no other stage, it's only this. And okay, so you say as a first class citizen, what does that mean in the context of a
I mean,
standalone product?
if there is a piece of UI and you want to some drop down or from some, gallery of inputs, gallery of triggers, want to select something. I guess you would be happiest if there is like an icon or whatever. You click, that GitHub releases your trigger, and then you somehow start listening on new releases appearing on that repo. Not to get into technical details, either GitHub can hit you once a new release is up, or just theoretically speaking, you poll for new releases. Whenever you detect a new release, it's fed into your stage. And then it can, start straight away or wait for the approval. In this case, it seems super useful for it to wait for approval. I need to take a 2-minute break. I'll be back.
Oh, you're back.
Mm.
Just remapping this. You need inputs. In this case, my input is, yeah, let's continue. So we stopped at triggers. I define my input. I have this version type input called Semaphore Community Edition. Now I need to define when does this stage gets triggered. And I select some, there's a list of triggers, right? And there's a GitHub-based triggers, for example, right? At this point, I need to connect my GitHub account. Oh, yeah, I select new releases because that's a first-class citizen as a GitHub trigger, and it says, okay, since you're new, you need to connect your GitHub account. You need to create that GitHub app or install it or whatever. And I need to connect repository. In this case,
Yeah, I mean there is some cheat code here. We'll see about that. One cheat code could be that you can specify, you can generate like an endpoint for this stage, for this trigger, and you get that, whatever secret kind of string, and then you can paste it in your I don't know if it's possible to do, but I guess it is on a Git on a repo level, and you say once a new release is there, please trigger this hook. Like manually. There are hooks, I think, for on the level of repo
on GitHub.
Yeah, and you just go there and you paste that string, and you manually click that. Once a new release event is triggered, you want this to be hit. But then it would not be that nice of an experience, but could theoretically work for many other sources of hooks, because we will get a JSON payload from whatever source. It can be, whatever, and then we say okay, and you would need to tell us which string do you want us to extract from which field, and we will take that as a version. We will take that as an input. So it would be like an agnostic way to feed data into Semaphore without now creating like dozens of connections. Okay, there is a support for GitHub releases, for this, for that, for all kinds of things, but we make that generic thing. We generate a URL for you. You put it somewhere, maybe in Basecamp, literally, when there is a new post in Basecamp. They hit us with a JSON, blob. We need to have like a DSL, how we are going to take certain, maybe a title of a new post created on Basecamp, whatever is needed, whatever goes into the version or wherever. I would stop here, but you get the idea. There is.
Yeah. So in this case, you reach this trigger section of the stage definition, and in this case, we give you a webhook endpoint.
I'm saying that's a possibility that we can, think about. You don't have to change this. It's more in the realm of possibilities and extensibility. So we are, very agnostic there if we support that. You hit us with something, we'll accept it, we'll take the payload, we'll save the payload, and you will somehow tell us what do you want us to take from that payload and feed into the input.
So we would provide you with a webhook endpoint.
Yeah, the URL.
Let's write it down. Yeah. URL. And do we also provide you with the payload format?
I mean, you cannot control the payload format. Payload format is whatever it is on that other service. So what you would need to provide us is to tell us what to take from where. I can give you an example of a syntax that could specify that.
Yes. How do I map whatever payload I'm sending to this?
I'm going to write down in this chat, but like a trivial example would be that the payload is this.
By the way, you can add it to this.
You can keep sharing. I'm going to share this. It is not a big deal. So let's say that the payload is this, what I shared, and some third-party service is going to hit us with that.
Yep.
And then what you would need to say to us is potentially something like this. Not sure, if it will be exactly like that, but with the second line that I sent, that would say to us, what should we take from where and feed it into the version out of objects from this, release. We'll take a name and then we would connect it to the version. Input one equals that, let's say.
Yes. So it will be input one. Yeah. Okay. Let's say you can do it one of these two ways. I mean, this is something similar to what we are going to do with that Git-agnostic approach, where you're using that post-receive hook to hit our webhook and send us the payload. But the difference is that we give you the definition of how that payload needs to look like, and we are expecting
it's the same
a certain format. But here you are defining that when you're defining stage.
Sorry for distracting out the message.
Parallel chat.
Sorry for making
No, that's
unprofessional.
Okay.
You have to respond. It's provocation.
I got it. Oh. Okay. All right. So I defined my stage name. I defined that I have a single input that is required. I defined one of these two ways to trigger this, and then I assume that the next thing is what this stage does, right?
Yeah.
So how do I define that?
I think it would be very hard to not impossible, come up with a better idea than workflow builder gets triggered. And you get a workflow builder to say what do you want to do. Because what we are going to run is, x.yaml, which defines Semaphore pipeline. We are not going to reinvent the wheel in that category. And the easiest way to create it is by One is to change from the gallery of templates, packages. You get the idea. This is what you're working on right now in terms of templates.
Yeah.
And then tweak it in Workflow Builder. I mean, you essentially know you pretty much have the commands that you are running. And instead of running them manually, I mean, for installing, Helm into the DO,
Yeah.
you would want to put them into a system. Ideally, 5 one-liners that would do the job. And the input that you will get will be this version that will be fed to you through either like a JSON on a disk or environment variable exported.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a bit about this. Okay. I'm get it. I'm in Workflow Builder. I either selected a template or I got there straight away.
Yeah.
Let's say that I can use DigitalOcean CLI to reset the machine to a clean state.
Yeah, that kind of complexity I would not include into the conversation now, but
there is one reason why I'm starting it. I need to get this version of, oh no, I don't need anything from the repository really in my job, right? In my pipeline, because at this point my pipeline is not.
The question is, what is your repository? You don't have a repository.
Exactly, my pipeline is not connected to GitHub repository at this point.
We can later talk if it's a good idea or not, but
okay,
it's definitely a nice.
But in this case, I don't even need it, and.
But that is leading us to that Git-agnostic,
Yeah,
I mean, for direction.
For this user journey, for this use case, I don't need it to be connected to the repository because I just need to run Helm install. It's a bunch of other commands before it, but I run Helm install and that's it. I'm not pulling this version from the repo. It's the Helm install does it. Yeah. So I run installation. And I have some pass fail state that I've defined.
I mean, if pipeline passes, it's green. If you want to do some additional like reasoning, if something has been accomplished or not, like put that in the pipeline. That's one approach. You deploy poll for your DNS.
Yes. That's what I would do. I don't need it to be a separate thing in stage. I can just do it in the stage pipeline.
Yeah. If you really figure out the need to have that like whatever readiness check or however we're going to call it, we can add that later. But
okay, for my use case that we are mapping out here, I'm definitely okay with just that being part of the pipeline.
Yeah.
So I defined what will run. Is there anything else that I need to define?
You need to give us credentials.
For what? Oh, for DigitalOcean thing, yes.
But it's in the realm of like secret, environment variable. I guess for the DO is token. But it's the current secret concept. You need to define a secret. And Maybe it's a separate thing. Maybe it's not under run. So you have inputs, triggers, you have run, and then a secret is maybe a separate high-level concept or not. But I think it is.
Well, how would I'm new to Semaphore. I go here. I have this step that says run. Maybe I have this optional step here.
But you know how the creation process for deployment target works today?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more or less the same approach. You will be offered with an easy way to attach a credential to a stage, and we will feed that into the pipeline into the run.
Yeah, but I'm defining that when I'm creating the deployment target. So here I would need to have a step that says, oh, this is optional, but you can define this.
Yes.
And since I am a new user, I don't have existing Semaphore secrets that I want to attach. I just want to define this here.
Yeah. It's a stage level secret, to use our terminology.
Yes. Stage. Okay. And then I select and define what to run, workflow will, this, and it connects to DO using secret. I know this is maybe too much, but we can delete it later if.
I mean, it's all truth, and it needs to be done. Yes, those are details, but are essential details.
Health check is outside of this connecting to the machine. Maybe I just have a. What do I? Oops. I don't know how to indent this. What's the shortcut? Never mind. I'll figure it out later. Okay. No, sorry. There we go. It's actually this. Okay, so what's next?
Oh, you're done.
Yes, I couldn't leave it like that. Okay, what's next?
I don't know, but I have to say that I'm very happy with what we have so far.
Let's finish it. I have a health check and stage passes. Do I need this stage to have some outputs, or do I? No,
not necessarily. I mean, let's say passed or not is the output that you just get for free. I don't think that necessarily you need to have another output.
Am I even defining outputs when I'm defining stage?
And that's a tricky area, you know, how to implement. I wouldn't dive into that.
I don't need them in my use case.
It would be easy to add.
Yeah, okay. There will be output generated automatically anyways, and that is the stage state, right? Well,
I mean, to say why I'm happy about this, because through this, exercise and what we did, although might need to be changed, we got a lot of things that we wanted through also some other initiatives. I mean, one thing is that yes, it's a deployment. It solves you the deployment case, but it's also like a general automation tool. I can be triggered by anything. I can run a pipeline that can do whatever you tell me that pipeline should do. Input can be what you tell me that it's input. Currently it's only git sha. Here it can be anything. In our case it's a version, and it will be semantic version string essentially. And it is Git-agnostic. If we decide, okay, we'll keep that YAML for you, it will be versioned, in our system, which I think is a huge benefit. So through that, it's also like a Git-agnostic.
yeah, yes.
Yeah. So those are like the great things about it. I mean, the current system has also its place. The current system is very optimized for the CI kind of work, the current project as it is. So you have branches, you can filter branches. I mean, that's, I started thinking about, and we don't need to go into the rabbit hole. Can this replace the current system?
Oh, no, I will stick to these user stories for now. This is the simplest one that we have, and I would maybe continue adding a few more, and then that will require us to map out functionality as we go. But this is the super straightforward one where I have a single stage, okay? And then there's next one would be just adding additional stage. Because, for example, and this is somewhat close to my use case, I also have that Google Kubernetes environment that I want to deploy to potentially and test stuff. I mean, right now I'm testing in a single environment, but let's say that after I'm done with testing on Linux machine, I want to make sure that the installation piece, not necessarily the app, right? I want to test the app in one environment, but I want to make sure that the app is installing properly in all the other environments, which would be Google Cloud Kubernetes and AWS.
I mean, on this abstraction level of stages, we'll see what will turn out to be, but I could almost say that it's trivial because it's fine. You want to test here first. You could deploy 2, 3 environments, in parallel. You can have 3 stages that are listening for this, and you hit it in all of 3 in parallel, or you can do it, sequentially. You deploy it to first one, test it there, then you click whatever. Go to the next one, go to the next one. But the input is the same, is the version.
Trigger is not the same.
Trigger is a previous stage.
Yes.
But it carries pretty much the same, version, what you need. You need that version.
Yes.
And then you have DO, GCP, VM, GCP, Kubernetes.
Yes, but the initial stage, which is DigitalOcean stage, needs to output the state, passed, failed, wherever, right? I need to...
The idea was, just to say, the idea was that whatever whatever the stage got as an inputs, it is also passing it further as
Yes.
embedded output. So
Yes. So this stage would output the version or whatever the input was, which in this case was version, but it would also, in addition to that, output the stage state.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
fast, yes.
And we can map that. Maybe not now. Maybe we can pause this for now. But I see the next step of mapping that user journey of, okay, I have this, and now I have automated this deployment to my DigitalOcean VM whenever there is a new release of Semaphore. But I want to expand that and say, after I'm done testing on this, I want to approve this to be deployed to my Google Cloud Kubernetes and AWS instance. And let's say that I have a few other people testing this on those instances, right? So
it should be easy, but doesn't mean that we should not do it. Yes, we can do that as a next, because this can be that example, one stage, something useful, and then the next phase could be that.
Yeah, it should be easy, absolutely, but it's just going through that user journey and mapping out the new concepts that are not here, right? But maybe we should pause now and continue tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good. It's interesting that this Google Meet doesn't have a timer, so I don't know how long is the meeting. How would I see that?
There is no such option. You can see
yeah,
when the meeting started, and that's it.